Good afternoon. We will be commencing the webinar very shortly. We're just waiting for a live feed to be established through social media, and we'll be underway. And it would appear that that's occurred all right. So welcome to the Strategic Review for an Accountancy Firm. I'm Peter Towers, Managing Director of ESS BIZTOOLS. I hope that you're having a wonderful day. We are broadcasting this webinar on a live feed to social media channels, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So welcome to the people who are watching us there. And we're also obviously doing a live webinar to people all over Australia. And if you're watching this webinar at a later time, which suited your timetable a bit better than 12 noon AEST, that's great. Welcome. If you have any questions on any aspect of this webinar, can you, if you're watching it live, can you type in your question into chat and I will answer it later in the webinar. And if you're on the live feeds to social media or watching this at a later time that suits you a bit better, unfortunately, you obviously can't just log in. Send me an email, please, with your question. peter@essbiztools.com.au. I'm indebted to Andrew Geddes, the former chair of Green Cross Limited. He was chair for 10 years of that company. And prior to that, he had advised the founder of Green Cross when that business commenced as a small veterinary surgery in Townsville 35 years ago. So Geddes had a long involvement with that company and took it to be a listed public company, and it became a top 200 ASX company. Andrew shared with me his thoughts on strategic reviews in a podcast, which we recorded 2 weeks ago. And if you're interested and want to listen to that podcast, by all means, please go to our website, www.essbiztools.com.au, and go to the podcast. And there are 2 podcast groups that we have. This one was recorded within ESS BIZTOOLS Business Advisory Services podcast, and you can click on to the most recent one, which was the one with Andrew Geddes. First strategic review should be for the accounting firm, and that's a direct quote out of what Andrew was talking about in the podcast. I think it's important that there's an awareness of advisory services developed within your accounting firm or bookkeeping firm before you start talking to clients about advisory services. Your firm should be the first client that goes through this process, and this will give you a better feel for what it's all about. One of the first steps that has to be taken, irrespective of the size of the firm, your firm, is to appoint a leadership team, because leadership teams are very important. In fact, Geddes, who continues to act as a consultant chairman, a CFO type role for a number of accounting firms and other businesses around Australia, has indicated in the podcast that he will not accept appointment into that role unless the client has definitely created a leadership team, because he wants to know there's a team there, not just the CEO or the owner. And the leadership team should become an expert in at least one diversified service offering. In the podcast, Andrew refers to a 5-partner firm, 40 staff, as being the best firm that he's ever worked with in 45 years of advising accountancy firms. So that's a big rap. And he's based his comments on what they have done. They have a leadership team that has 12 people in it, actually. And they were the trial side, if you like, for a lot of Andrew's theories on this concept. The leadership team members need to develop individual industry knowledge, as well as knowledge of business advisory services. So what they did with 12 leadership team people was make sure that each of them had an individual speciality when it comes to advisory services. And I'm going to go through some of those a little bit later in this presentation today. And the leadership team members also looked at industries. So was their firm very prominent in farming, or was it in retail stores, or was it in pharmacies, or GP medical practices, or specialist medical practices? Whatever, they were set about identifying that, which is what I'm suggesting you do, so that you develop expertise below the annual set of accountants and tax returns. And we're going to return to that concept a couple of times in this presentation today, because if you're going to be able to give real advice to your clients, you need to know the nitty-gritty of what goes on in the business. Business advisory services, virtual chief financial officer services are the services that we're particularly looking at today. But obviously the strategic review for the accounting firm you'd also be looking at your taxation return clients as well. Business advisory services is based on planning, budgeting, and reporting. And this is the main things that you're going to be using the strategic review concept to talk to clients about. They're not particularly worried about being having discussions with you about their tax returns, Norman. They're more worried about planning, budgeting, reporting, and some of the other issues which we're going to touch on shortly. So these key aspects being implemented within your firm that I'm now going to discuss. A business advisory board for your firm. Now, it's becoming quite popular for advisory firms to be established. I'm on one that's for a rather large company that's really hasn't got a functioning board of directors, so the advisory board has got a lot of responsibility, although we only act in an advisory capacity. But should you have an advisory firm board for your own accounting firm? If we're using this video today as being establishing a model for, first of all, your firm to implement before you offer this service to clients. Who would you invite onto the advisory board? Let's think about what you would be suggesting to your clients. You'd be suggesting an accounting person, you or someone from your firm, but the other people might be an industry expert in the industry that they're in. It might be an engineer or a lawyer or a marketing expert, someone that understands all about social media and how you market utilising these tools that are now available. So what sort of people would you invite to be on your business advisory board? It wouldn't be another accountant. It may not be a lawyer. But these days, of course, it could be someone with knowledge on social media and some of those types of services. So think about it. I think it's important that a partner or an external consultant is appointed as the facilitator for the strategic review meeting process. Why I've put or an external consultant is I know partners are busy, and perhaps you like the concept that it's someone external that's looking at this, because this is the model that Andrew Geddes himself is practicing. He's the external consultant for the 8 businesses around Australia that he's the external chair of, and he does this planning, quite distinct from the CEO or the leadership team members. food for thought. So let's look at the pre-strategic review process. The facilitator plans what's going to happen in this process. The first thing is that financials are prepared and distributed 2 weeks prior to meetings. And I think the facilitators should be making notes and comments on those accounts. They just don't get sent around. It might be querying what the gross profit percentage that's been achieved in certain areas. It might be the average fee. It might be various key performance indicators have raised some questions. So bring them to the attention of the attendees. And one of the key documents that Andrew was suggesting was that there would be an opinion questionnaire. And this is drafted by the facilitator based on comments that have been made over a period. There may have been a couple of other meetings, but of the strategic review group, the leadership team, during the year. But this is the prime meeting. This is the meeting that sets in place the strategies for the forthcoming financial year. So the opinion questionnaires also distributed 2 weeks prior to the meeting to allow people to read it and to return the questionnaire prior to the actual strategic review meeting. I've just said that, so the leadership team members complete the questionnaire and return it to the facilitator. And from that, the facilitator produces an agenda and a report and forwards that to the leadership team members. So the report is basically, these are the points of contention. These are the things that I think we're going to find very interesting in our discussions. And can you give some more thought to a particular issue so we can discuss it and debate it with all of the information available? So let's look at this whole concept of strategic planning. And again, I'm looking at it from your point of view as accountants in your own firms, but this is a product that you can deliver for many of your clients. So where are we now? Where's your firm at? What do you rate yourself? Did you read the Commonwealth Bank's Accounting Market Pulse report released last year in May? They interviewed 45 firms and they had fairly strong views on where they were headed. They thought the only problem they had was skills attraction and retention, or talent attraction and retention was the words actually used in the report. And they saw that business advisory services was going to be their major expansion activity during 22-23. I'm eagerly awaiting this year's update of that report to see what they have to report this year. So where are you now? I know a lot of people told me they were going to try to adapt similar strategies as what was outlined in that report last year. If you were one of them, were you able to do that? What do you want to look like to the marketplace? Do you want to just look like an everyday accounting firm that the market has great difficulty in distinguishing characteristics of? Or do you want to portray yourself as someone that's different, someone that's doing things differently? It might be how your website's presented, might be how your office is presented, your newsletters. Do you have newsletters? Do you produce videos? So what do you want to look like in the marketplace? Bear in mind these exact same questions you could ask with your clients. Now, Andrew Geddes doesn't like SWOT analysis, and he's turned it round, so we have a TOWS analysis. So the T is for trends which are coming at us. What's happening? And this has hopefully been raised in the opinion questionnaire. What's the trends that are affecting us in this business? Because around the table, you're going to have your leadership team. So you've probably got an administration person there. You've got someone that's a real taxation expert, and that might be all they do. There might be an auditor. It could be financial planning. And there could be one or two people who are involved in advisory or are wanting to go into advisory. So what's the trends which are coming at this juncture to your firm? What are the opportunities that are out there in the marketplace? I think there's a lot of opportunities for advisory services, but you need to look at that yourself. How many client companies have you got that have currently got turnovers of $2-3 million? Where are they going? Are they aspiring to grow into $10 million companies? If so, they're going to need a lot more accounting services supplied to them. W is for weaknesses. What are the weaknesses within your firm? Is it talent attraction, or more importantly, the retention? And we're going to touch on some of that a little bit later on. And S is for the strengths that you are going to build on. You need to have identified what they are and make sure that everyone is aware of them as you plan where you're going. As I've said, that exact same model is something you could introduce for having a discussion with your own clients or prospects that come to you because you're offering these services. So let's go some of the reviews that are necessary to allow this process to work. Obviously, you need the financial performance for the last 12 months. It mightn't be quite 12 months. It depends when you undertake these types of meetings. Andrew Geddes believes the best time is in April or May. Later on, I've also added June because I'm very much aware that we're presenting this webinar on the 8th of June, but there's still 22 days to go, because I think you should be talking to your clients about a strategic review if you don't normally do so that perhaps you can offer some services before June. Analysis of clients. Where are your clients from? What industries? I find this rather an interesting question when I consult to accounting firms, because sometimes I find that even in only 2 or 3 partner firms, no one really knows how many GP medical practices your firm is acting for, or how many real estate agents, or how many retail stores that are in major supermarkets, and so on. How many farmers? How many beef farmers? I can remember raising a question to an accounting firm years ago when there was real problems with the cut-off of exporting of Australian cattle to markets like Indonesia. And just quite casually asked this accounting firm that I was giving some advice to, how many clients have you got that are caught up in this ban on exporting of live cattle? And the answer, I think, at the time was, half a dozen clients. By one of the partners gave me that answer. You know, when we got it actually checked, it was something like 36, because he didn't know what his other partners were doing. Now, in today's age of really advising clients on a broader range of things than just taxation, I think it's important that you really know how many clients you've got in particular industries, because perhaps it's better to centralize those 36 grazing firms with one partner who becomes the expert in grazing, beef grazing properties, and so on. Or there might be other things that you can do, particularly if you know you have got a certain number of clients in those industries. Because the marketplace respects people who they think are experts in a particular industry. At one stage, I was recognised as an expert in real estate, only because I was doing a business plan for a real estate agent. And he rang me and said, hey, there's some sort of expert coming to town tomorrow. Do you want to come in real estate? Do you want to come and listen to him? I said, by all means. I went and listened. And he was an expert. But more importantly, there are 45 real estate agencies represented that day. And I looked around the room and I couldn't see any other accountants. There were a couple of other invitees there. I think they were lawyers. I got introduced to a few of them. I got another 4 or 5 business plans out of that 3-hour visit to that particular conference, because they thought I was an expert in real estate. I knew a bit about it, but I learned a lot more from some of them, and I learned a lot from the speaker that particular day. So look at your industries. What other services have you been asked about by clients? We use a business review form that was originally designed by Andrew Geddes, and with Andrew's permission over the years, I've changed it a fair bit. But it's an important document. It's the needs analysis. And I think the best thing is to hand it to the client, go through it with him or her, and then say, how about you fill that in, and I'll come back and have another cup of coffee or glass of wine with you, or a cup of tea, in a week's time, and we can go through and look at your answers. Let the client answer the questions. Because I've had people come back to me and said, well, the questions were, what's my debtors days outstanding? They didn't know. That was one of the questions in the needs analysis. Do you need any assistance on lowering your debtors days outstanding? An obvious question, if someone doesn't know what debtors days outstanding was referring to, is what's mine? But what other services have you been asked about? Is someone preparing a list of them? Because that should be one of the key subjects that we're discussing at this strategic review meeting. What's the client demographics? We've talked a bit about clients in their groups, but have we got some star clients that are leaders of their industries? Well, what else can you do with them that might rub off on your firm? What consultations with clients are occurring? Are you trying to adopt a policy of regular contact with clients throughout the years as part of the introduction of advisory services to them? I think it's very important, if possible, that you get the client to agree that there's going to be 12 monthly meetings a year, because there's going to be a business review meeting held at the end of each month, so that the financials can be analysed and reported on, and you should have submitted that report. So what clients could we provide to clients? What services could we provide to clients beyond taxation? It's really what we're asking. So I've listed some of these here, and these are the key areas that you might have allocated to your leadership team. And if you've only got 3 or 4 in the leadership team, well, they either get 2 or 3 Guernseys, if you like, in this team of allocations, or you also allocate some to some of the other accountants, or you only decide to initially look at 3 or 4 specialist areas and then work on a few more next year. You don't have to adopt all this in day one. ESS BIZTOOLS has got 32 subject sections within our overall system, and we are currently working on adding at least another 5 or 6. So by the end of the year, that will be up nearly to 40. We're not expecting everyone to adopt 40 from day one, but we're putting 40 into the system because people ask us about particular things. So let's look at them. Business due diligence review. I think this is very important, and it hadn't occurred to me realistically until about a year ago, when an American accountant used the terminology, you need to know your clients 1 inch wide and a mile deep. 1 inch wide, the word inch should be there. 1 inch wide and a mile deep. You need to know them. You need to know a lot more about what's going on in your client's business than what you do for the preparation of annual accounts and a tax return. They need a business plan. A business plan is like a map for tourists. They need it. Otherwise, they're not going to know when they get there. And the real benefit is you can compare how you're going. And then based on the business plan, you should have the financial interpretation of the business plan, which is the predictive accounting reports, budgets, cash flow forecasts, projected balance sheet, the all-important key performance indicators. And I think it's the KPIs that are one of the key issues that accountants in public practice, with due respect, and I was one, miss out on. I was also, though, Chief Financial Officer and Company Secretary of a listed public company. We were in the meat industry. The KPIs were vital. We had KPIs for daily activities, primarily in our retail butcher shops, but also in our major meatworks. We had 4 major meatworks in the eastern states. The KPIs were prepared every day. Now, we had different names for them, and we had to do some explanation to the foreman and other people who were getting these reports so they understood what was meant. But it was very important. You don't see many key performance indicators when you're just preparing an annual set of accounts and a tax return, but they are important for your clients. That's why I'm listing them there. The 52-week accounting service. This is one of the new concepts that we're really promoting, because the more we delved into this, the more we explored with a number of people what was going on and spoke to SMEs. I think there's a requirement for daily reports, probably not in every business, but most definitely in anything to do with retail or production. There's a range of daily key performance indicators that can be implemented that will give management interesting information. A weekly performance report, attendance, number of customers, percentage of customers that your client got in a shopping centre. And then and a financial report based on some estimates, of course, and then monthly financial accounts compared to the budget variation report, and a report then prepared by you, if you're acting in this role and being the virtual CFO, to go to the business review meeting with the client. I think that's really offering real services to your clients. And this is what is starting to happen. And in the podcast I referred to earlier, Andrew Geddes gave an example of a proposal for that type of service, which was costing just under $32,000 plus GST for the client, that was immediately accepted by the client. So it's there. And we have a published version of that quotation. The actual quotation was 4 days old when Andrew referred. Funding of the business. Very important question, especially with the financial climate which we've got at present. Not good news, is it? Higher interest rates, higher inflation rates, and now this dreaded word called recession being used. A lot of your clients are going to need to look at their funding. Can they borrow? They need security, and the banks are going to be tougher to deal with. And the interest rates, of course, now we've got a prime rate of 4.1%, are going to be a lot higher than what they've been for the last decade. Now, I can remember rolling commercial bills at 21.5% back in the late 80s, early 90s sort of era. But a lot of the younger generation of entrepreneurs have no understanding of that. So we need to be guiding clients through this process. So they may need additional capital, whether it's crowdsourced funding, equity raising, or raising some capital under Section 708, or if they're a new company that's been involved in development of technology, perhaps as an early stage innovation company. There are opportunities. PSS has all of those products covered in our packages. Research and development. I read an interesting report a couple of weeks ago from the government as to the amount of money that had been spent on research and development activities by companies who were eligible to get a cash refund. So that meant they had turnovers of under $20 million. The investment in 2021-22 was $3.4 billion. That's a lot of money basically coming out of what a lot would be the SME market, because those turnovers are naught to $20 million in that category. Whenever I talk to accountants about research and development, I normally get a reaction, oh, no, we don't get involved in that. And I always say, why? I did talk to a Sydney accountant a couple of weeks ago, and he specialises in research and development. And I was so thrilled to find someone who was actually getting involved in that, because clients need it. and it's something that you could look at. I think it's a great opportunity for accountants. Grant application, succession planning, debtors management, business risk are all some of the portfolios that could be allocated to members of the leadership team. Setting appropriate charge out rates to generate targeted profits, especially for tradies and manufacturing businesses, and also for professional firms. The two models there are slightly different, but they're there in our system. Or if you've got a retailer or a wholesaler, looking at the stock mix and the markups in a retail or wholesale business to generate the targeted profits. Some of the other things you might offer to clientele, and therefore you need someone that's going to be the flag bearer for that activity. Board of advice. Board of advice, as I mentioned earlier, it's a growing area and one that you can be involved in. And it's not a voluntary role. Clients want volunteers. We'll say to them, well, you're in business, you're offering commercial services. Most of them realise that they want value, they will pay for it. Board of directors, corporate governance, and scaling up. And that's what I was referring to before when I said a client that might only be 1 or 2 or 3 million turnover at present that aspires to 10 or aspires to 100 million. I've got one of those at present. We're not there yet, but that's the grand plan. And it creates a lot of interesting work and challenging work various times as companies grow, because there's a lot of potential problems. Could you establish a minimum fee of, say, $5,000 so you can have a deeper involvement with clients? That's what Andrew Geddes referred to. He believes that firms that are really going down the advisory path need to establish a minimum fee. Now, the one he referred to was $5,000. That might be a bit too high, but it's something you can consider in your strategic review. Let's move on. Analysing your competitors. What are they doing? What can you learn from them? How are you going to compete against them? How about someone else down the road's coming out and offering everything we're referring to today? They're already geared up. They've spent the last 3 months getting ready. How are you going to compete with them? Are any demographic changes occurring in your marketplace? Is there a whole new ethnic group moved in, or different types of business operations? Has there been some new industrial parks open that's going to attract some different businesses? Does someone need to very quickly become an expert in manufacturing industries because there's an industrial park and it looks like there's going to be half a dozen or so new manufacturing businesses, but basically SME businesses open up? Is there any attitudinal dangers or government legislation coming our way? Well, accountants are always going to have that problem, aren't we? So obviously you've got to be aware of it. Let's look at team development, because this is the biggest issue that the CommBank Accounting Market Pulse report identified a year ago that was worrying accountants. So are you developing skills amongst all of your team, your team? Are we systematically introducing inexperienced accountants to the real world situation? Andrew Geddes has got very firm views on this, and he advocated in the podcast, and he's advocated in a number of interviews that I've had with him that we've repeated then in an Accountant's Minute article, that younger accountants should really be blooded into the real world situation, that they should be allocated to a partner or a senior manager, and they sit near them, and so they can listen, they can see, they can be called upon to get things. They should be invited to client meetings with the partner or senior manager. Their job should be to take the minutes, just like the way bankers used to operate. And some of you younger people might not have seen that in banks, but in the not the real old days, but 20 years ago, when you ever turned up to be a bank manager, there was always someone else in the room with a pen and a pad, and you'd get introduced to that person. And I got to know quite a number of them around the town, and their role there was to take the minutes, but they were there being trained by the manager. They were meeting the client. They were understanding how the more experienced manager handled a situation with a client. And on a number of occasions, I was there with my client, and some of those meetings could be a bit interesting. So the younger banker was learning a lot. Andrew Geddis's proposition is that we should be doing the same thing with younger accountants. Have you developed a written system on how your team development's going to work? Is that listed on your website? Someone suggested the other day that these activities should be listed on your website if you're going to use it to try to attract talent to your firm. So what's the results of the attempts to attract new team members that you're going to discuss at your strategic review meeting? And has this approach helped? Because that's something you got to always ask, isn't it? It's all very well to lay out new proposals, but we've got to come back to reality at times and see if they're working. What's the meeting cycles in your firm? Is there a 5-minute stand-up meeting each day of the leadership team? Is there a weekly performance review meeting? And is there a monthly leadership meeting to look at the financial results and the business performance? Obviously, the tax lodgement program is important in that. But what about the other things on the advisory work area? They need to be factored in as well. What commitments have we got? Who needs some assistance? Who's got a specific request that the dedicated team looking after that client have got no expertise in? Might be that on a risk management area that the client needs some assistance on. All these things can be discussed in the meetings. So what's the action plan going forward? You've had this meeting. What are the 3 key objectives to be achieved in the next 3 months? What's been agreed upon? What trends affecting of the firm are we going, and what are you going to do about them? So people have sat and discussed. Andrew Geddis suggests these meetings for a business client that's got a few businesses around them could be over a day to a day and a half. Think about it. He also believes they should be at a remote location, away from the office, away from the phones. And what opportunities are affecting your firm? And who's going to follow them up? Got to be more than a talk fest. There's got to then be action under the action plan. What threats have been identified, and who's got the responsibility to try to mount a defence against those threats? Have you got the time and the resources available to handle all these assignments that are being handed out? Or do you need what you probably tell clients they should outsource to you at times? Perhaps you need to outsource to some external people. There might be a marketing question. Well, get a marketing consultant to give you the answer. There might be a computer technology question. Well, get someone that's got better skills in those areas to be able to give you the answers. I mentioned earlier that Andrew Geddis believes the best time to undertake these reviews was in April and May. I've added June because it's all prior to the start of the financial year. In fact, Geddis indicated in the podcast that by the end of April, he had concluded for 8 separate business clients, some of which are fairly large, had completed their strategic reviews, and from that they had then finalised their business plans, updates, and their strategic planning on budgets, cash flow forecasts, etc. How many of those have you done for your clients for 23, 24? Because that's the process. If you've done one for your firm, that's what we're asking here today. Depending on the circumstances, you could have further meetings in your strategic review group during the year, but my comments today are concentrating on this key meeting, which is really trying to set the scene for the new financial year. You've thought about it, you've analysed it, you've brought everyone together, and now you've committed it to writing, and all you've got to do now is implement it, rather than starting to think about these things in July, August, or even September. You've lost a quarter of the year already. So this process is best implemented by your accounting firm first, so you can introduce the concept to some of your clients. Now, your clients might come first if some of them really want a strategic review done before the 30th of June this year. If you haven't got time, get your accounting firm organised in the interim, but that's the best practice. Now, ESS BIZTOOLS can assist you. We have developed a wide range of products, as I've referred to earlier, based on input we've been receiving back from the marketplace and observations we're making of what SMEs are saying. And we've already discounted our prices because we are committed to trying to assist the Australian accounting industry to respond to this market requirement by accountants. So to try and make sure that there's enough accounting firms committing to this journey of supplying advisory services, we're reducing our subscription levels for the next 12 months by a further 10% on our recent special offer. So the advanced package, which was $6,500, is now going to be only $2,519 for this next 12 months, as long as you accept by the 30th of June. And the starter package, which is ideal for a smaller firm or someone that's just wanting literally to put your toe in the water and just start doing a little bit of this, that's now only $1,529, including GST. Now, if you want to, you can pay monthly, and the monthly fees are there. To subscribe, please go to our website, www.essbiztools.com.au. Or if you want to know more, obviously visit our website to familiarise yourself, or you can contact us. Send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, or phone call, 1800 232 088 is the best number. And we will set up a complimentary, no obligation Zoom meeting for you. In this same series, we have another webinar on next Thursday, the 15th of June, looking at board of advice. We talked about board of advice a couple of times today. And I'm going to take you through and give you my observation on board of advice from a very practical viewpoint as someone sitting on boards of advice and having also sat on boards of directors, of course. What's the role? How can you fit in to do it? So thank you very much for being with us today in this webinar. If you have any questions, please send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au, and I will get back to you. Thank you for being with us today. Have a great day. Goodbye. And thank you very much for